So, I'm a bad driver, but I didn't think I was this bad. And no, it's not because I'm Asian if you're asking. I blame it on the bad luck, okay? Let's not write me off as a stereotype. This is the story of why I failed my driving exam quite a few times. For starters, I'm originally from Canada, so the Canadian Ontario driving exam is different from the American one. You have to take 1 written test and 2 driving tests to be a full-fledged driver. There's 3 tests: the G1, the written test, the G2, your first driving test, which is supposed to cover the basics of driving, and G, the final driving test, which covers everything, plus highway driving. When I was in high school, people were getting their driving permits, or G1, like we say in Canada, as soon as they turned 16 years old. It was just kind of the thing you did. However, I was not the average teenager. I am very special, so I decided that I would wait until I felt comfortable to get my driving license. So this was at the prime age of 18 years old. Actually, I don't think I was ever comfortable getting my driver's license, but I think my parents forced me to get it started because they were tired of carpooling me around town for my play dates. So one day when I was 18 years old, I went to the driving center to take my written driving test. Before going, I asked my friends how the test was, and they told me it was easy and I would definitely not need to study for it. Just remember that the pedestrian always has the right of way and the snowplow rules, or something along those lines. Yes, because this is Canada, so there are rules involving snowplows. My dad drove me to take this written test, and I was so nervous because I had no freaking clue of what to do. And unfortunately, I failed my first test. I don't exactly remember what happened because clearly it was a traumatic event and I decided to delete it from my memory. But I do remember my dad was very pissed off at me because I told him I didn't study for it, and he said I was wasting his time, as he had to wait for me to take the test once again. So I reviewed what I did wrong on the first test and I took the test again. Thankfully, Jesus blessed me in that moment because out of sheer luck, I passed the written test. I got my first G1 permit license and I was so happy. Not because I passed and I could start practicing my driving, but because I wouldn't have to take the next G2 test, the first stage of the driving test, for another year. Canada by law makes you wait a year to take your G2 license test. So in between tests, you have to take a year break. So I was free from the shackles of the G2 driving test for another year. Hell yeah. During the year between my driving test, I'm just gonna be honest, but I hardly drove. I think this came down to 2 reasons. One being that I didn't want to, and the other being that my parents did not want me driving their car, which is understandable. So in the summer, they intervened and decided that I needed practice with someone else, not them. And they signed me up for driving school. Driving school. I can't remember exactly what I learned, but in class I remember during the breaks we watched a lot of Friends. My driving instructor who taught me how to drive a car was named Mike. Bless Mike's soul. Thank God he put up with me. Mike was a retired grandpa who was teaching just to make extra money. He was the first person to teach me how to drive because, quite frankly, I knew diddly squat. He also said occasionally that I was looking skinny that day, which I don't know how to take that in 2020, but I guess I was happy at the time to hear those words. The thick look with 2 C's was yet to trend. So Mike, my driving instructor, taught me how to drive, which was great and everything. But unfortunately, I was going off to college that year and I was leaving Canada to move to America and I was moving to a city. So I didn't need to drive there and I pretty much forgot almost everything I learned. Whoops. However, when I returned back for Christmas, my mother told me that it was my Christmas present that she signed me up to take my G2 driving test. Just in time. Exactly how I wanted to spend my Christmas break, stressing over a G2 driving test. Again, I deleted these memories from my brain, and I don't exactly remember what happened during my first driving exam, but you can probably guess that I failed. I remember it was snowing heavily that day, it's Canada, and I decided to drive a little bit slower than usual. This was not good enough for my instructor, and she failed me. I cried for hours. But my friends reassured me that most people fail their first time, but I don't know if this is true. Maybe they just said this to make me feel better. Alas, I did not give up. I took the test once again the following summer when I came back from college, and again, I failed! Okay, the second time I failed, I was doing everything perfectly, except at the end I had to back into a parking space. I was not very good at backing up, and the space was very small because there was 2 vans on either side of the parking spot. The instructor said I almost hit a car, which I didn't, and she failed me. I was so frustrated because I actually practiced a lot for this exam, but I failed again. All I can remember was that she was So in this point in time, I'd failed my driving test 3 times, which is fine. 2 weeks later, after I failed the second time, Mike told me I could take the test in his car because I was doing a test in a van before and it was bigger, so maybe a smaller vehicle would help me pass. When we got to the driving center, he got out of the car and glared at my driving test lady, and when I took the test, I passed with flying colors. I'm not sure it's because of the lady was scared of Mike or because I was an amazing driver, but anyways, I passed. I was so relieved. Again, I was so happy because I would have to wait 1 more year until I could take the final test. So I had another year break of thinking of no driving. So for a year, I hardly drove and enjoyed my driving, stress-free life. Unfortunately, time doesn't stop and I had to get my G license. This is the 3rd stage of the driving test, the last test. If I passed this final test, I would be a full-fledged driver and I would never have to do another driving test again. However, it was easier said than done. The G test is a highway test, so they check all maneuvers plus your highway driving. Of course, you already know where this story goes. The first time I took the G test, I failed because I was not being observant enough on the test. Even though I was looking, my teacher said I wasn't checking enough, and sure enough, I failed. But honestly, I was already traumatized 3 times and cried way too much over failing driving exams, so this was nothing. Her failing me did not get to me this time. I was the failing queen at this point. So sticks and stones could break my bones, but her words could not hurt me. Just try me. Just try and fail me again. Okay, when I took my second G test, I actually went into the test thinking I would fail, and this could be the reason why I failed. Because I thought since during the G2 test, I passed on the 3rd try, the 3rd try is always the charm. This is just logic at this point, and of course, I did fail. Up to this point, I failed my driving test 5 times. I couldn't even be upset. This was simply a part of my identity now. I was a regular customer at the driving test center, so I failed my 5th time because I took the test during rush hour and the highway was plugged with cars. During my test, I was expected to merge safely onto the highway, which I did, but I had to cut someone off a tiny bit to get in. So yeah, I failed. I had to cut someone off to merge onto the highway. It was the only way I could get on. People were being rude and not letting me in, so I had no other choice. Anyways, the rest is history, and just before my 5-year period was up, I passed my test on the 3rd try. I had taken 8 tests up to now, and this was the last one, baby. After I passed my last and final driving test, I reached cloud 9. For 5 years, I suffered the mental repercussions of not having my license, and now I was free. I was reborn a new human. I think it all comes down to, you know, when you're so scared of something and then you do it and it's fine and you think back, like, why was I so scared? This was pretty much my situation with driving. To this day, I love driving. It's great. The freedom to drive around anywhere is incomparable. I really don't know why I was so scared. Driving is the best. However, my mother still won't let me drive her car. I see you, Mom.
If you like this video, please subscribe because there's a great video coming next. Thanks for watching!